Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Today we have two brand new crazy revenge stories for you. Our first one will lead us back to the 90s where there's a great revenge story taking place. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave comments so we know what kind of stories you love the most. Smells like teen prima donna spirit. Bit of background. My little brother was in a high school band, and although I was never a part of it, I used to drive them around to gigs and occasionally to the studio. I could drive, and if I helped my little brother out, it meant I got to borrow our mother's car for a while. So it wasn't entirely altruistic. As well as little brother, there was also Kev on vocals, Bob on guitar, and Dave on drums. So this was in the late 90s. I was about 19 or 20 during these events. My little brother's 2 years younger than me. They were a rock/grunge band. Kev was very much the ringleader. His dad worked for a local radio station in a town about 100 miles away, and Kevin would often insist on making decisions for the band because his dad's background trumped everything. His dad was a producer. Mostly all happy times, though Kevin would occasionally pick on Dave and drummers in general. What do you call a guy who hangs out with musicians? A drummer. Haha. Partly Kev just didn't feel that drumming required any talent, and partly he didn't like that his younger sister had a bit of a crush on drummer Dave. Mostly he was just a prima donna knobhead. Drummer Dave was an exceptionally amiable and easygoing guy and took it all in good spirit. Dave also had a parrot, whom we'll call Chekhov's parrot, at his place, and sometimes when they'd be practicing in the garage there, Kev would complain that he could hear that sodding parrot over their music. Highly unlikely, and would, whenever the chance arose, try to upset the parrot by flipping it off, rattling its cage, or just making sudden movements towards it. He was a bit of a dick. One sunny afternoon, Kev had told the band that he was going to visit his dad, divorced parents, and be at his dad's 50th birthday party, and there'd be loads of music industry people there. And he'd get the chance to tell them about the band and maybe even play them a track or two and hand out some demo CDs. Maybe they'd get some airplay or even a record deal with a proper label. But the catch was, they had to fire Dave and get a new drummer. Little Bro and Bob talked it over and decided they'd rather get a new vocalist, and decided to call drummer Dave, tell him what was going on, and that they would pretend they'd fired him to appease Kev. But if it came to it, they'd both refuse to cooperate unless Dave was fully reinstated. I was supposed to help in the drummer replacement by putting an ad in the local paper, but I can be forgetful sometimes. Just never remembered. Anyway, it was getting close to the big birthday, and I had paid out of my own pocket for a bunch of blank CDRs to put the band's demo on. We cut about 50 CDs in the end for Kev to hand out or to play in front of all these music industry people. All cases nicely labeled with the name of the band scrawled on the actual disc. We handed them over to Kev a week before his departure for the big party. The band had one more practice session at Kev's garage before he went. At this session, my brother was helping clean up their McDonald's leftovers, and upon opening the outside trash can, he saw about 50 CDRs with the band's name on them. WTF is going on? He didn't confront Kev, but showed Bob what he'd found. Bob said he needed to go to the bathroom and went into Kev's room, where he also found Kev's packed bags with about 10 CDs with just Kev's name scribbled on them. Kevin was going to screw them over. Bob took one of the CDs, stuffed it in his jacket, and he and Little Bro made their way to the car so I could drive them home. They told me what had happened, and we put Kevin's CD on in the car. It sounded less grunge and more take that. I guess Kev ran the numbers and thought he'd have a better shot at fame and fortune in a boy band. We hatched a plan, and we needed Dave to make it work. Instead of going home, we went to find drummer Dave and filled him in on the latest developments. We recorded his parrot squawking and all of us squawking, "F you, Kev," and such like. We got a good solid minute of this, then looped it, mixed it, put some of Dave's drums in for good measure, went and copied the same brand of CDR that Bob had taken from Kev's luggage and duplicated it. We cut 10 copies. Now we just needed to plant the CDRs in Kev's luggage. On the afternoon that his dad was picking him up, I took them to Kev's house to wave him goodbye. He was a little surprised to see us, but figured we wanted to make sure he went through with the plan to showcase the band. Bob distracted him with a masterful "I love you, man" speech. Little Bro went to say hi to Kev's little sister, and I went inside to pee. We were both looking for Kev's luggage. Little brother distracted Kevin's little sister, and I did the swap. Kevin never tried contacting the band after he came back. and nobody even tried to contact him. An ad was placed in the paper for a new singer. Previous members need not apply. A good 5 years later, drummer Dave encountered Kev's little sister, who was able to give some closure to the matter. Their dad had called to everyone's attention early on in the party to say how proud he was of his boy and how they would hear his son's band. This was in a hired hall in a big hotel with a DJ. Kev was called to the stage and explained that his band couldn't get its act together, sadly, so he'd brought along some of his solo artist material. The DJ dutifully queued up the CD, but it didn't play. He shrugged and asked, "You sure you want to play this?" But he was forcefully told to play it, so he did. They got maybe 10 seconds of, well, this is an odd way to start a record looks from the crowd, followed by a bewildered, when does the music start expression. Soon, it became very clear that no music would ever start. And this was just a parrot, some drums, and a few squawked statements about Kevin's integrity as a human being. Kev apparently fled the stage and disappeared for an hour or so before anyone saw him again, during which time he found that every single one of his demo CDs was filled with parrot squawks and suggestions that his taste in pornography was somewhat niche. Some of his dad's buddies apparently still call him the little squawker to this day, nearly 2 decades later. Final, where are they now bed? Drummer Dave briefly hooked up with Kev's little sister, but quite a few years later, and it didn't really work out. He's a fireman now and married with 2 kids. Kev's little sister. She has a girlfriend now, and last I saw of her, she was back on break from university and had developed quite the taste for tequila. Little bro is now a web developer for a faceless marketing firm, married with a kid. Bob moved away a long time ago. Nobody's in touch with him anymore. Kev, last we heard, was working at some IT recruitment firm, spending his weekends go-karting. Chekhov's parrot apparently is still alive. And our second story. Mean lady hates everyone, especially us. We buy her house after she failed to pay her debt. The house we live in was built at the same time as hers. My parents were often at the construction site and help if they could. The strange lady was nice to us at the beginning, but that changed soon. This happened around Christmas 2017. We have a neighbor who's very unpopular in our neighborhood. She's well known for harassing people who use the public path at the left side of her house. The path is one of 3 to reach the public playground behind her house. If someone uses the path, she would scream at them that this is her path and her private property, which is wrong. Sometimes she would close the path with a red and white plastic chain and wouldn't let anybody use the path. She would scream at kids on the playground when they were loud in the daytime. She always has her shutters almost down so she can stalk the people on the street and stay unseen. If some kid's ball would land in her garden, she'd bring it to the kids and destroy it with a knife right in front of them. All kids knew this and would run by her house if they wanted to go to the playground. When the neighbors' kids were playing in the winter outside in the snow, she would call the CPS equivalent in my country and tell them that they were locked outside by their parents as punishment. If someone walked by her house at night, she would often call the police due to a noise complaint. She was known by everyone in our neighborhood as the witch. But she hated my family in particular. We lived right beside her house. Our houses shared one wall. When me and my sister were young, we would use the swing in our garden or jump on our trampoline. She would regularly file noise complaints and often harass me and my sister when we were alone in our garden. If my parents heard her screaming swear words at us from the first floor of her house, they would yell back. If me or my sister walked on the path by her house, she would scream at us. We used the path daily on our way to school. One time when I came home from school, she was in her car with the trunk on the sidewalk. When I walked by the back of her car, she howled the engine and the dark exhaust hit me. Almost every night, she would hit the shared wall with something to wake us up. Sometimes she'd ring our door and try to make us go to other neighbors to complain about small things. We often had lawsuits with her. One time because her trees grew 2 meters over the border. Another time because she built a fence by sticking bamboo mats in the dirt and tearing it down the next day and telling police we destroyed her wooden fence. We won all the lawsuits against her because my uncle, he's teaching law school, gave us good advice on how to deal with her and named lawyers he knew were good. She never paid the workers who repaired things at her house and the electrical and water bills. When her old car broke down, she didn't pay the car mechanic and never got her car back. She was in debt and had a mortgage on the house. When the foreclosure came, we were at the court and bought her house. She was with us in the courtroom when the auction was and tried to buy her own house but wasn't allowed because she couldn't provide proof that she has enough money. We bought her house where she'd lived for 20-plus years right in front of her. We renovated it when she left. We repainted all the rooms, renewed the insulation, put in a new wooden floor. My grandparents will be moving into her old house this fall. And now the neighborhood kids will be able to use that path without fear. It's good news. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one with more great stories about crazy people.